So that's our question for you now here at 260-1870, 866-889-0870 is our toll-free line. 2 years ago, the vote was about change. Is this year's vote about changing the change? Is every election about change? The two polls out there, 65% are saying throw everybody out. 75% are saying things are going badly in the country. The highest, let me say this one more time. This has been on the highest number on any eve of any midterm election since the question was first asked in the mid-1970s. So, I mean, are we just having more and more dissatisfaction with our government? 260-1870. Is this fuel or fodder for a possible third party? And what would that third party be? How could they completely separate are we going to see one party split and become two parties, or are we going to see people get frustrated with both parties and break off and form a third? 260-1870, 866-889-0870, our toll-free line. Now, all that's in the possible. Let's go on to your phone calls. John up in Mandeville. Hey, John, you're on WWL.
Hey, Spud, good afternoon.
Thanks for calling, man. How you doing?
Absolutely. Good. Thank you. Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm actually very optimistic about a third-party opportunity. And I've looked at this really hard for some time, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners has. But some of that kind of the thing that I see here is that there are very few true Republican and very few true Democrat loyalists out there. Most people are really anti-Republicans or anti-Democrats. We know where the enemy is. There's no doubt that the enemy's on the other side. But just about what everybody feels is that we can't find our friends. We know the other side, advances either social policy or fiscal policy that we just cannot stomach. And the instinct is if that's bad, then the other side must be good. And notice I'm not saying just the Republicans or just the Democrats. Mm-hmm. I'm a college-educated guy, a white-collar fellow, who by most people's standards would be a Republican. My father was a lifelong Democrat. And although we shared all of the same values in life, when we went to the voting booth, he turned left and I turned right. And I never could understand that until I sat down and started looking at it. And I realized that the Democrats, that he's not so much pro-Democrat as he was anti-Wall Street corporate Republican. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much that I was pro-Wall Street Republican, it's that I was anti-tax socialist policy that the Democratic Party openly espouses. And it's one of those kind of dynamics that I think really explains a lot of the divide and conquer that goes on in this country. People that we otherwise get along with on a daily basis, we always vote in opposite parties. And if you think about that, and if you start realizing that there are very few true Democratic loyalists or Republican loyalists, and you start realizing how vulnerable those two parties are in terms of their power grab, and the way to beat it is to come up with a viable third party that, quite frankly, drains support from both the Republican and Democratic parties. Mm-hmm. Most people don't realize, for example, as much as the Wall Street Republicans have advanced this globalism agenda that's putting a lot of white-collar professionals out on the street nowadays, years ago, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA into law on December 8th, 1993, and he put all the blue-collar people out on the street. Now, those are Democrats that he put on the street years ago. And in this economy, when nobody has a job, nobody once stops to talk about NAFTA and the effects of globalism, although it's clear to me that this is the fruits of those types of policies, which both the Bush administration and the Clinton administration have advanced. And we're getting more of the same. Nobody's talking about those issues, but that's where the issue is. And I would subscribe to you that I've looked at a lot of different parties out there, and I actually subscribe to one that's a very small one, but one that is philosophically strong with the types of issues that I think most Americans feel, and that's the Constitution Party. It's very small. Most people don't know about it. But it is very it resonates on those kinds of issues.
Haven't I? You know what? I've read I've read very little about them, but they show up, if I'm remembering correctly, they show up at Tea Party rallies, but they kind of hang to themselves.
My problem with the organization is that they don't have a real resonant message. They all have, a lot of folks have their own issue, and there's no sense of coalition of those issues. But I will tell you that I have looked at it extensively, and I am convinced that it is the structure, it is the architecture that this country needs. Most people don't know about it, of course, so they're going to continue to be in the minority. But as soon as people learn about it, I think they'll start saying, you know what, there's some merit to this party. And it's not the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party, a lot of people think are conservative based, but I would submit to you that a party that advances a lot of open border policy and so-called free market as opposed to fair market fiscal policy is far from being conservative. That's why they never really can get a lot of traction.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say conservative, I don't mean Republican. I mean traditional American interest.
I got to step away, though. Interesting, the Constitution Party. I'm going to have to look up more about them. So, but I mean, when you go vote, you look at your vote as your vote, not as, because there's some people out there, oh, man, don't vote this way, you know.
Well, absolutely.
Don't waste it.
I don't vote against anybody anymore. If I don't find somebody to vote for, I don't vote. And some people might say that that's copping out. No, it's not. I mean, if my choice is strychnine or arsenic, I'm sorry. I'm not going to take either one. But it is my job to try to do something about it, and that's by having these kind of phone calls or otherwise trying to become involved, like I think a lot of Tea Party members are. It's a movement without an organization right now. But
the problem is, if they become an organization, are they going to become the thing that they dread the most?
Well, I don't think so. As long as they know where the enemy is. The enemy's not the other side. It's a two-party system, Spud, but it's not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. It's the elite versus the masses. And that has nothing to do with how much money you have. It's whether or not you have a national interest or a globalist interest. And that's where the breakdown is. Black, white, male, female, young, old, it doesn't matter. That's what's going on in this country. And as people start realizing it, they'll start seeing that we're all being played against each other. And it's never going to get better until we know that.
All right, man, I appreciate it. Interesting points, too. 260-1878. I got to step away. Interesting, though. Anti-Republican, anti-Democrat. Interesting way to look at it.